The night shift at Outpost 23 was always quiet. Too quiet for most people, but Tom Walker liked it that way. The soft hum of machinery and distant stars kept him company while he worked on the station's endless maintenance tasks. His small office, filled with old repair manuals and half-empty coffee cups, had become more of a home than his actual quarters. Tom sat at his desk, running routine checks on the communication systems. The screen in front of him showed the usual patterns of human radio chatter, supply ship signals, and the random noise of space. He had done this job for 5 years now, and he knew every normal sound the station could make. That's why the new signal caught his attention. At first it was barely there, just a whisper in the static, but there was something different about it, something that made Tom's hand freeze over the controls. The pattern wasn't random. It had a rhythm, like music played too slowly, or numbers being counted in a language he didn't know. He adjusted the frequency, trying to clear up the signal. The more he listened, the more certain he became. This wasn't normal space noise. The pattern repeated every 12 seconds, each time slightly different, but always following the same basic structure. Tom pulled up the mathematical analysis software he used to track radiation patterns. When he fed the signal through it, his screen filled with numbers. But these weren't the chaotic values he usually saw from solar winds or distant stars. These numbers formed sequences, perfect, deliberate sequences. "This is impossible," he mumbled to himself, reaching for his cold coffee. The patterns looked like multiplication tables he learned in school, but they were being used to build something more complex. A message. The station's night shift supervisor, Bill, walked past Tom's office. "Walker, you're still staring at those screens. Nothing ever happens on night shift, you know that." Tom hesitated. Bill was a good guy, but he was also a stickler for rules. And the rules about unknown signals were clear. Report them to command and don't investigate further. Too many false alarms had wasted too many resources over the years. "Just checking some interference," Tom said, trying to sound casual. "Probably nothing." Bill nodded and moved on, his footsteps echoing down the metal corridor. Tom waited until they faded away before turning back to his screen. The signal was getting stronger now, and he could see more of the pattern. It wasn't just mathematics anymore. Hidden in the numbers were coordinates, a location in space, not too far from the station, and something else that made his heart beat faster, a countdown. Tom pulled up the star charts for that sector. According to official records, it was empty, just another patch of void between human space and the unknown. But the numbers didn't lie. Something was out there, using mathematics to call for help. He ran the signal through every analysis program he had access to. Each result confirmed what he was starting to believe. This wasn't random, and it wasn't human. The mathematical patterns were too perfect, too alien in their precision. The countdown in the signal showed less than 50 hours remaining. Tom didn't know what would happen when it reached 0, but the urgency in the mathematical patterns told him it wasn't good. He thought about following protocol. He should report this to command, let them analyze it for a few weeks, maybe months, while committees decided what to do. But by then, the countdown would be long finished. Tom looked at his reflection in the dark screen. A tired man in his 30s, with messy brown hair and a coffee-stained uniform. He wasn't anyone special, just a maintenance engineer who was good with numbers and had spent too many nights alone with the stars. But he understood what he was hearing. Someone, something, was screaming for help in the only universal language they knew, mathematics, and while everyone else heard only noise, he heard the desperation in those numbers. Tom started checking the maintenance shuttle schedules. He had access to them for repair work, and it wouldn't be the first time he took one out to fix something. By the time anyone realized this repair mission wasn't really a repair mission, he would be long gone. Someone was out there, counting down their last hours in mathematics, and Tom Walker, the night shift engineer who liked quiet better than people, couldn't bring himself to ignore them. Tom's hands moved quickly over the maintenance shuttle's controls. He had already packed the basics, emergency rations, repair tools, and extra oxygen tanks. The small shuttle wasn't meant for long trips, but it would have to do. According to his calculations, he could reach the signal source in 20 hours if he pushed the engines hard. The station's night shift was ending, and he needed to leave before the day crew arrived. He had filed a fake repair request for a communications relay 2 hours away from the station. It would give him some time before anyone realized something was wrong. As he finished the pre-flight checks, heavy footsteps echoed through the launch bay. Tom's heart sank. Commander Reed walked in, her face stern in the dim lighting. "Going somewhere, Walker?" she asked, looking at his packed supplies. The commander was known for her sharp mind and sharper discipline. Nothing happened on her station without her knowing about it. "Yes, Mom. Communications relay needs fixing. Filed the request an hour ago." Tom tried to keep his voice steady, but his hands were sweating on the controls. Reed looked at her tablet. "Funny thing about that relay. I just checked it myself. Working perfectly fine." She fixed Tom with a hard stare. "This is about that signal you've been tracking, isn't it?" Tom's silence was answer enough. "Walker, I've been doing this job for 20 years. Every few months, someone picks up a strange signal or a mysterious pattern. Know what they all turn out to be? Natural phenomena, equipment malfunctions, or old satellite echoes. Never once has it been anything worth risking a career over." "This is different," Tom said quietly. "The mathematics in it. It's too perfect, too deliberate. Someone made those patterns, Commander. Someone who needs help." "Show me," Reed ordered, climbing into the shuttle's cockpit. Tom pulled up the signal analysis on the shuttle's computer. He explained the mathematical sequences, the hidden coordinates, the countdown that now showed less than 40 hours. Reed studied the screen for a long time. "Even if you're right, Walker, we have protocols. Submit the data to command, let them analyze it. That's how things work. In 40 hours, whatever this is will be over. Command will still be filling out paperwork." Tom looked at his commander. "Please, I've never asked for anything in 5 years. I just need you to look the other way for 2 days. And if you're wrong, if you fly out there and find nothing, best case, you lose your job. Worst case, you drift too far out and run out of fuel. Space isn't forgiving of mistakes, Walker." Tom nodded. "I know. But what if I'm right? What if someone dies because we were too careful, too slow? I couldn't live with that." Reed was quiet for a long moment. The launch bay hummed around them, machinery going through its endless cycles. "I'm ordering you not to take this shuttle," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'm ordering you to forget about this signal and return to your regular duties. Is that clear, Walker?" "Yes, Mom." Tom's heart sank. Reed walked to the launch bay door. Before leaving, she turned back. "The maintenance logs won't be checked for another 48 hours. If someone were to borrow a shuttle during that time, we wouldn't know until it was too late to stop them." She gave him a long look. "Don't make me regret this, Walker." After she left, Tom sat in the cockpit, his hands shaking slightly. He knew what she had given him: plausible deniability and a head start. It wasn't permission, but it was as close as someone in her position could give. The shuttle's engines hummed to life under his hands. As he guided it out of the launch bay, Tom thought about everything he was risking. His job, his future, maybe even his life. But the mathematical patterns kept playing in his mind, their desperate rhythm impossible to ignore. He set course for the coordinates hidden in the signal. The station grew smaller behind him as he accelerated into the darkness. Somewhere out there, numbers were counting down, and someone was waiting for an answer. Tom just hoped he would reach them in time. After 18 hours of travel, Tom's shuttle sensors picked up something floating in the darkness. At first, it looked like space debris, but as he got closer, he saw the smooth curves of an artificial design, unlike anything humans had built. The ship was about twice the size of his shuttle, its hull a strange metallic blue that seemed to shift colors as he approached. The vessel was dark, No running lights or visible power signatures, but the mathematical signal was definitely coming from inside. Tom's hands were steady on the controls as he matched speed with the drifting ship, but his heart was racing. This was first contact, something humans had dreamed about for centuries, and he was facing it alone in a stolen maintenance shuttle. He brought his shuttle alongside the alien vessel, looking for a way in. The ship's design was flowing and organic, making it hard to spot what might be an airlock. After circling it twice, he found what looked like an entry point, a circular depression in the hull with faint markings around it. Tom put on his spacesuit, double-checking every seal. The suit's oxygen supply would last 6 hours. Well, he muttered to himself, no point coming all this way just to stare at it. He activated his magnetic boots and stepped out into space. The short walk across to the alien ship was the longest of his life. Each step felt like it might send him spinning off into the void, but his training held. When he reached the circular depression, he found markings that looked almost like musical notes arranged in mathematical patterns. Tom pulled out his tablet and compared the markings to the signal he'd been tracking. The patterns matched. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his hand against the center of the circle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hull seemed to ripple, and an opening appeared. The airlock, if that's what it was, cycled automatically. Tom's suit sensors showed breathable air inside, but he kept his helmet on. The ship's interior was dimly lit by strips of bioluminescent material that pulsed with a soft blue light. He followed the signal, moving carefully through curved corridors that seemed to be designed for beings about human size. The mathematical patterns grew stronger as he approached what seemed to be the ship's center. Finally, he reached a sealed door covered in more of the musical note patterns. It took him 10 minutes to figure out that the door's lock was a mathematical puzzle. The solution was related to the same patterns he'd been following from the station. When he input the answer, the door slid open with a soft musical tone. Inside, he found her. She was floating in a containment field, her body curled up as if sleeping. Her skin was a pale blue that shifted colors like the ship's hull, and what looked like delicate fins ran down her arms. She was roughly human-sized and shaped, but there was nothing human about her ethereal beauty. The containment field was clearly a prison, its controls locked down with crude human-made devices. Scorch marks and signs of violence around the room told a story Tom didn't want to think about. Raiders must have attacked the ship, killed the crew, and left her trapped here when they couldn't figure out how to communicate with her. As he approached, her eyes opened. They were deep purple, with no pupils, but somehow he could feel her gaze on him. She uncurled in the containment field, moving with a grace that suggested she was used to environments with less gravity. She made no sound, but the mathematical patterns in the room's displays changed. Tom watched as new sequences appeared, building on the patterns he'd been following. She was trying to talk to him through mathematics. Tom pulled out his tablet and displayed the signal that had led him here. Her eyes widened, and the patterns changed again, faster now. She pointed at the crude locks on her prison, then at his tools. He didn't need mathematics to understand that message. Tom started working on the locks, keeping one eye on his suit's oxygen display and the other on the door. He had come too far to fail now, but something told him that time was running out. Just then, a deep vibration ran through the ship. New lights flickered on in the corridor outside, and a sound like distant thunder reached them. They were no longer alone. Tom's hands moved faster on the locks. The thunder of approaching footsteps grew louder, and the alien girl's patterns on the screens became more urgent. He recognized fear in the way the mathematics spiraled and repeated, a universal language of panic. The last lock clicked open just as voices echoed down the corridor. The containment field disappeared, and the alien girl dropped gracefully to the floor. Up close, her skin shimmered like the northern lights Tom had seen back on Earth. "We need to move," Tom whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. He pointed at the door, then made a running motion with his fingers. The alien nodded. Apparently some gestures were universal. They had barely reached the corridor when the first shot hit the wall beside them. Three figures in mismatched space armor stood at the far end, weapons raised. Their gear marked them as raiders, the kind that prowled the edges of human space, looking for anything valuable to steal. "Step away from the creature," one raider called out. "That's valuable merchandise you're messing with." Tom's response was to grab the alien girl's hand and run in the opposite direction. More shots followed them, leaving scorch marks on the organic walls of the ship. The alien girl matched his pace easily, her movements fluid despite the artificial gravity. They'd reached a junction, and she pulled him left, her grip surprisingly strong. The raider's heavy boots thundered behind them as she led him through a series of turns. Tom realized she was taking them to another airlock, one closer to where he had docked his shuttle. A shot caught Tom's suit in the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. The fabric sealed automatically, but the impact left him gasping. The alien girl stopped, her colors shifting to deeper blues. She touched the wall beside them, and suddenly part of the corridor sealed shut behind them with a musical tone. "That won't hold them long," Tom muttered, checking his suit's integrity. The alien girl was already moving again, pulling him toward the airlock. They could hear the raiders cursing and trying to bypass the sealed section. They reached Tom's shuttle just as the raiders broke through. The alien girl's eyes widened at the simple human craft, but she didn't hesitate to follow him inside. Tom's hands flew over the controls, starting the emergency undocking procedure. The shuttle broke free from the alien ship just as the raiders reached the airlock. Tom pushed the engines hard, accelerating away. In the rear display, he saw two smaller ships detach from the alien vessel, the raiders' craft, starting pursuit. "Hang on," Tom said, taking the shuttle into a tight turn. The alien girl gripped her seat, her fins fluttering with the movement. She pointed at his console and began moving her fingers in patterns. Numbers appeared on his screen, calculations, trajectories. Tom understood immediately. She was helping him plot an escape course. The mathematics were elegant, taking into account things his simple shuttle sensors couldn't even detect. He followed her calculations, weaving through space in ways the pursuing ships couldn't match. A warning light flashed. One of the raiders' shots had clipped their engine housing. They were losing power, and the raiders were closing in. The alien girl's patterns became more complex, filling his screen with urgent mathematics. She pointed to a distant spot of light, then to his navigation system. Tom checked the coordinates she was indicating. It was an old mining facility, abandoned years ago when the ore ran out. Not much to look at, but better than being caught in open space. The raiders fired again, closer this time. Tom's shuttle shuddered, more warning lights coming on. They were still an hour from the mining facility, and he wasn't sure they would make it. The alien girl touched his arm, her skin cool against his suit. When he looked at her, she nodded once, firmly. The message was clear. She trusted him. After being betrayed and left to die, she was putting her faith in a stranger who had answered her call. Tom set his jaw and focused on the controls. He had crossed half of space to find her. He wasn't going to let her down now. The damaged shuttle limped through space, its engines struggling to maintain power. Tom had managed to lose the raiders temporarily in a field of space debris, but the warning lights on his console told him they wouldn't stay hidden for long. They were still 40 minutes from the mining facility, and every system in the shuttle was failing. The alien girl hadn't stopped working since they escaped. Her fingers danced across Tom's tablet, filling it with complex mathematical patterns. At first, he thought she was still helping with navigation, but these equations were different. They reminded him of the music theory he'd studied in college, before he chose engineering instead. "You're trying to talk to me, aren't you?" he asked, watching the patterns form. She looked up at him, her color shifting to a lighter blue. Her fingers moved faster, and suddenly, the patterns aligned into something he recognized. A simple sound wave equation. Tom pulled up the shuttle's basic audio program. "Here," he said, inputting the equation. The soft, musical tone filled the cabin. The alien girl's eyes brightened, and she quickly added more numbers. The tone changed, becoming more complex. Tom recognized it as a mathematical representation of sound. She was turning equations into music. He adjusted the program, allowing for more complexity, and suddenly the cabin filled with a haunting melody that somehow carried meaning. Through the combination of mathematics and music, images formed in Tom's mind. He saw her people, beings of shifting colors who communicated through mathematical harmonies. They were researchers, scientists studying the stars. She showed him their discovery. A massive solar storm approaching, larger than anything in recorded history. The storm would hit both human space and her people's territory. Millions would die if they weren't prepared. Her research team had been trying to warn everyone when the raiders attacked. They hadn't just wanted to steal the ship, they wanted to prevent the warning from getting out. The raiders want to profit from the disaster, Tom said slowly, understanding dawning. If they're the only ones who know it's coming. The alien girl, who had shown him her name in mathematics that translated roughly to harmony of evening stars, but which Tom thought of as blue, nodded. She pulled up new equations, showing the storm's trajectory and timing. They had less than 2 weeks before it hit. A blast rocked the shuttle, throwing them forward in their seats. The raiders had found them. Blue's fingers flew across the tablet, showing Tom a new escape route. But more warning lights flashed on his console. The engine was failing. "We'll never make it to the mining facility like this," Tom muttered. Blue touched his arm, her skin cooling his through the suit. New equations appeared, showing energy calculations. She pointed at his suit, then at the shuttle's power core. Tom understood. "You want to reroute power from my suit to the engines." It was dangerous. If something went wrong, his suit would lose life support. But her mathematics were perfect, showing exactly how to make the connection safely. As another blast shook them, Tom made his choice. He opened his suit's power panel and began connecting wires to the shuttle systems. Blue's equations guided his hands, showing him exactly where each connection should go. The raiders were closing in, their ships visible now in the rear display. Tom finished the last connection, and Blue input the final equation. Power surged through the shuttle's engines, pushing them forward with renewed speed. They accelerated away from their pursuers, but Tom's suit display showed his oxygen levels dropping. They had maybe 30 minutes of air left, just enough to reach the mining facility if everything went perfectly. Blue's color darkened with concern as she watched his oxygen levels fall. She tried to show him new equations, ways to reroute more power back to his suit, but Tom shook his head. They needed every bit of energy for speed now. The mining facility appeared as a dark shape against the stars. Behind them, the raiders were falling behind, but still in pursuit. Tom felt his breathing getting harder as his suit's systems failed, but he kept his hand steady on the controls. Blue's music mathematics filled the cabin. Not equations this time, but something like a song. Even without words, Tom understood. She was trying to give him strength for the final push to safety. The mining facility loomed before them, a dark shape of metal and shadows. Tom guided the failing shuttle toward the main docking bay, his vision starting to blur from low oxygen. Blue's fingers moved across his tablet, helping him calculate the approach despite the shuttle's dying engines. Behind them, the raiders' ships were closing in again. Their weapons had better range than the mining facility's old defenses. Tom knew they had only minutes before they would be in firing range. The docking bay doors creaked open slowly, their ancient mechanisms protesting after years of disuse. Blue's mathematics sang through the shuttle speakers, harmonizing with the facility's old systems, coaxing them to life. Tom didn't understand how she did it, but somehow her equations were speaking to the machinery itself. A blast rocked the shuttle just as they entered the bay. Warning lights flashed everywhere. They were losing what little power they had left. Tom's suit oxygen was almost gone, his breathing becoming more labored with each passing second. They hit the deck hard, skidding across the bay floor before coming to a stop. Blue grabbed Tom's arm and pulled him up. He stumbled, his head spinning from lack of oxygen, but she held him steady. Together, they ran from the shuttle toward the facility's inner doors. The raiders' ships were landing behind them. Through his fading vision, Tom saw Blue touching the wall panels, her fingers moving in rapid patterns. Lights began coming on throughout the facility, systems awakening to her mathematical songs. They reached the control room just as the first raiders entered the facility. Blue sealed the doors behind them, but they could hear the raiders' cutting tools already starting to work through. "What now?" Tom gasped, his suit warning him he had less than 5 minutes of air left. Blue's colors shifted to deep, determined blues as she moved to the facility's main console. Her hands danced across the controls, and suddenly the room filled with complex mathematical harmonies. Tom recognized what she was doing. She was using the facility's old broadcast equipment to share her warning about the solar storm. But the raiders were almost through the door. They wouldn't have time to send the message before being caught. The raiders' captain spoke through the door's comm system. "You're only making this harder on yourselves. That warning can't get out. Think about the panic it would cause. Think about the profit we can make if we're the only ones who know it's coming." Tom looked at the console, then at Blue. An idea formed in his oxygen-starved mind. "The facility's sonic mining equipment," he wheezed. "Can your mathematics affect it?" Blue's eyes brightened. She understood immediately, her fingers flying across the controls. The mining facility had been built to extract ore using precisely tuned sonic frequencies. With Blue's understanding of mathematical harmonics, those same frequencies could be turned into a weapon. The door burst open. Raiders poured in, weapons raised. Their captain stepped forward, a tall woman in skirt armor. "Step away from the console," she ordered. "We can all profit from this. The storm is coming whether people know about it or not. Why not make the best of it?" Tom could barely stand now, his vision darkening at the edges, but he managed to input the last command Blue needed. "Because some things are more important than profit," he said. Blue's mathematics reached their crescendo. The facility's speakers erupted with harmonics precisely tuned to affect the raiders' equipment. Their weapons sparked and died. Their comm systems wailed with feedback. Even their armor systems began to fail. The captain tried to fire, but her weapon only produced a musical tone. Blue had transformed it into an instrument. One by one, the raiders fell back, their technology turned useless by the power of pure mathematics. Through the last moments of consciousness, Tom saw Blue finishing the broadcast sequence. Her warning would reach everyone now, human and harmonic alike. Then his oxygen finally ran out, and he fell. The last thing he heard was Blue's mathematical song changing to a new pattern, a call for help, but this time one that both species would hear and understand. The mining facility's old communication array hummed with new life, broadcasting Blue's warning across both human and harmonic space. Tom watched from the control room as the mathematical patterns spread outward, carrying their message of danger and hope to two civilizations. The raiders' ships hung disabled outside, their systems scrambled by the modified frequency Blue had created. Their captain and crew were locked in the facility's old storage rooms, their weapons turned to scrap by the same harmonics that had stopped their ships. Tom's breaths came easier now. After they had landed, Blue had found a way to repair his suit's systems using parts from the facility's old life support. Her knowledge of mathematical harmonics had saved his life, just as his willingness to listen had saved hers. The first response to their broadcast came from a harmonic ship. Blue's people had been searching for her since their research team went missing. The patterns they sent were full of joy and relief at finding her alive. More importantly, they immediately began preparing for the coming solar storm. Human responses followed soon after. At first, there was confusion and disbelief, but when Commander Reed's voice came through the speakers, everything changed. "Walker, this is Reed. We've confirmed the storm predictions. All stations are beginning emergency preparations." There was a pause. "You were right, both about the signal and about not waiting." Blue worked at the controls, her colors shifting through happy shades of bright blue as she combined human and harmonic communication systems. For the first time, two species were truly talking to each other, using mathematics and music as their shared language. Ships were coming from both civilizations, rescue vessels, science teams, and security forces to arrest the raiders. But they weren't racing to get there first or compete for control. Instead, they were coordinating, working together to ensure everyone's safety. The raiders' captain had been wrong about how people would react to the warning. Instead of panic, the knowledge of shared danger had brought out the best in both species. Plans were already being made for safe havens, for ways to protect vulnerable stations and colonies. Two civilizations that had never met were joining forces to face the storm together. Tom found Blue in the facility's observation dome, watching the stars. She had shown him her real name through the mathematical harmonics, a complex equation that sounded like crystal wind chimes when played through the computer. But she seemed to like the nickname he had given her, responding to it with colors that reminded him of summer skies on Earth. She turned to him, her hands moving in now familiar patterns. The facility's speakers translated her mathematics into music, and Tom had learned enough to understand her simple messages. She was thanking him, not just for the rescue, but for listening when no one else would. "I only did what anyone should have done," Tom said. Blue shook her head, her colors shifting to show she disagreed. She pulled up an image of the stars on the dome's display, then added mathematical overlays showing all the ships that had passed near her while she was trapped. Dozens of vessels, both human and harmonic, all close enough to hear her call. But only one had truly listened. New ships appeared on the facility sensors, the rescue fleet arriving together. Human and harmonic vessels moved in perfect formation, their crews already learning to work as one. The solar storm was still coming, but now they would face it prepared and united. Commander Reed's voice came through again. "Walker, the Joint Fleet Command wants you and your friend to help coordinate storm preparations. Seems we need people who can bridge the gap between our species." Tom looked at Blue. She was already moving her hands, creating new patterns that combined human mathematics and harmonic music in ways neither species had tried before. She had learned his language of numbers, and he had learned to hear the mathematics in her music. Together, they had created something new. Outside, the first rays of a distant sun caught the fleet's hulls, making them shine like beacons in the darkness. The ships moved in harmony, two civilizations becoming one family among the stars. It had started with a cry for help and someone willing to listen, not to words, but to the universal languages of mathematics and music, of courage and compassion. Human and harmonic, they would face the storm together. And after that, they would explore the stars as one.